That was beautiful, Jody. Thank you. And good morning, everyone. I'm Reverend Catherine Bonin, and it's my pleasure to be here with you this morning. So I like to start with a joke. You ready to laugh? So why did the insecure person take flowers to a walrus? He wanted a seal of approval. See, nobody can give us a seal of approval because that has to come from within, right? And even though we all know this, we still look outside of ourselves for approval, for love and for acceptance. All month long, I understand you guys have been talking about cultivating authenticity and how that empowers us to step into life fully, to have integrity, to love ourselves more, just the way we are. And to do that, we have to embrace our own worthiness. As children of the divine, we are inherently worthy. We are born that way. It's our birthright. When I was in my 20s, I met a young couple who wrote a song called Perfect Already. And I wish I could remember their names, but I remember the song. The song really touched me deeply. And over the years, I've tried to find that song on Google and YouTube and all those places, and I couldn't find it anywhere. But you know, even though I can't find it out there, it's still in here. It reminds me all the time that we are perfect already. And even though we know this up here, sometimes we don't know it here. I remember when I first heard that song, I didn't believe it, but I really wanted to. And the more I explored this idea of worthiness and the more life lived me, the more worthy I started to feel, and the more I started to believe that I was perfect just the way I was. But you know, those feelings of shame and unworthiness show up for all of us, whether we like it or not. That's part of the human experience. And those feelings of not being enough, a fear of being unlovable, it's those things that convince us that if we work harder or do something different or just change this one thing, or hide things that we might not like about ourselves from other people, we might be lovable. We might be enough. But that's not the way it works, is it? When we pay attention to the things that trigger those feelings of unworthiness, we're able to recognize them and we're able to come to truth more quickly. And with practice, it happens faster and faster, and it's easier. Now, I say easier. It's simple, but it's not so easy, is it? So how do we consciously direct those experiences and recognize the opportunities of growth that seem to be those difficult times that pull us into those feelings of doubt and unworthiness? Well, we have to pay attention to moments of discomfort, because those are like flags that are being waved in front of us. It's spirit saying, pay attention, listen, this is for you. It's stuff that doesn't feel so good that we have to sit up and pay attention to. And then we have to step back and be the observer and see it, not be it. Sometimes it helps me to say things like, oh, look at that, isn't that interesting? That helps me step back and be the observer. And I have to remember that if something makes me uncomfortable, it's up to be healed. And it's the same for you. And as soon as we recognize that, that's the moment that we can shift our consciousness, the moment we can change our mindset about it. We have to be bare naked honest with ourselves and say, yeah, I'm feeling that, but it's not true. And the most important thing is that we embrace our authentic self, that we love ourselves no matter how we show up, warts and all. On page 50 in Brené Brown's book, The Gifts of Imperfection, she says, authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. Greg Bayer, in his book, Real Love, tells a story about a king. Well, the story starts when he's a prince. And he says this prince was very, very unhappy. And he was unhappy because he had warts all over his face. And so he wouldn't come out of the castle. He would hide in his room in the castle. Well, one day his father died, and the prince had to become king. And so he had to go out into the world, and he was still very unhappy because he had these warts all over his face, and he believed that people laughed at him everywhere he went. So whenever he went out, he put a bag over his head with two little eyes cut out of the bag. Well, as you can imagine, he tripped and fell all over the place because he couldn't see very well, and people still teased him and laughed at him. So he didn't go out of the castle very often. Well, one day he heard about a wise man who lived up on top of the mountain, and he thought, I'm going to go talk to that wise man. So he went up the mountain to see the wise man with the bag on his head, and he got there, and the man was sitting under the tree. So he sat down next to him, he took the bag off of his head, and he said, I've heard about you. I've come to get your help. And the wise man didn't say anything for a few minutes. He just looked at him and nodded, and he said, after a couple of minutes, wow, you have a lot of warts on your face. And the king got furious. How can you say that? It's not true. I'm going to kill you. And the old man sat back and leaned back, and he said, well, okay, guess you should call your guards. And the king said, well, I didn't bring my guards with me, but you can't say those kinds of things to me. It's not true. And the old man said, well, it is true. You do have a lot of warts on your face. He said, don't laugh at me. And the wise man said, I'm not laughing at you. He said, everyone laughs at me. And the wise man said again, I'm not laughing at you. And the king stood up very angry because he really felt like the old man was making fun of him. So he picked up his bag and he put it back on his head, and he started to head down the mountain. And he tripped and fell near a steep ledge, and he tumbled all the way down and landed in the lake. Well, he couldn't swim very well, and with the bag on his head, he couldn't breathe very well either. So the wise man ran down the mountain, got him out of the water, and saved him. And he took the bag off of the king's head, and the king was spurting and trying to catch his breath. And the king said, why did you save me? And the wise man said, well, because you're the king, and there's nothing wrong with you. He said, but you're smiling, you're laughing at me. And he said, I told you, I'm not laughing at you. And the king looked down and he said, the boys in the village have always laughed at me. And the wise man said, I'm not laughing at you. And then the king felt something was really different about this wise man. And so he looked at him. And in that moment, he realized that the wise man had warts all over his face too, but he hadn't seen them before. And the king said to the wise man, well, you have warts on your face too. And the wise man said, yes, I do. And the king said, do people laugh at you? And the wise man said, well, some people do, and I don't really pay too much attention to that because I have found my people, the people who don't see the warts and who love me just the way I am, warts and all. And the king said, wow, do you think if I didn't wear my bag over my head, people would accept me the way I am? And the wise man said, I'm sure that they would. And the king said, well, maybe I'll start by not wearing the bag on my head when I come see you. And the wise man said, how about this? How about you leave it here when you go down the mountain and back to your kingdom? And the king thought about it for a while, and he said, all right, I'll try it. Well, the king got back to his kingdom, and it was more beautiful than it had ever been before because now he could see everything. And some people still laughed, but he found his people who accepted him for who he was, warts and all, and he was finally happy. Well, like that wart king, we've learned to hide the things about ourselves that we're embarrassed about, the things that we don't like so much about ourselves. We believe that people express more affection and give us more attention when they think certain things about us. But it's not true because we're not being authentic. We're not being real. Hiding under bags, maybe we briefly feel safer, but we also feel very alone, like that king did. So when we can love and accept ourselves in a genuine way and let go of conditions and let go of the need for approval from someone or something out there, we start to truly love ourselves unconditionally. And that means accepting, appreciating, celebrating all of who we are. Remember the Velveteen Rabbit? That horse with its hair rubbed off? So loved. We love the warts, we love the bald spots, we love the extra pounds we carry, whatever it is. When we cultivate authenticity, it's not about becoming something different than we already are. It's about fully embracing and accepting everything that we are, leaning in and letting go of those old limiting thoughts and beliefs, and standing in our own personal truth and our own power. And by taking this up as a practice, we have the courage to be vulnerable. We have the courage to show people who we really are, and the courage to stand in the truth and the love of the reality of who we are in our own authenticity. And like the wart king, sometimes we don't want others to discover who we really are, because shame is a feeling that we feel when we think that something's wrong with us. It's different from feeling badly about our words or something that we might do. It means we feel bad about who we are. We think somehow we're flawed, but we're not. We see that everywhere we look in the Bible. There's a beautiful passage in the Hebrew Bible, the Song of Solomon. It's chapter 4, verse 7, that says, "You are altogether beautiful. There is no flaw in you." And the science of mind teaches us that we're spiritual beings made in the image and likeness of God, that is inherent in our worth. We're perfect already because our life is the life of God unfolding. And it can't not be perfect. It can't not be whole. It can't not be complete. Can you imagine thinking God not being perfect? Thinking God's not perfect or whole or complete? There's nothing lacking in God. There's nothing lacking within us when God created us. There's nothing lacking in us when we were born as newborns, and there's nothing lacking in us now. So what happens when we can actually embrace the parts of us that we feel are less than perfect? Things get better, and that's a promise. In Matthew chapter 13, verse 11 and 12, we're told, "For to him who has will more be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who has not, even what he has will be taken away." Now, yes, this can be about money and stuff, but it's also about self-worth. Do you know how amazing you are? Do you have any idea how amazing you are just the way you are? Do you believe it? Do you really believe it? Because we create from feelings. If we love ourselves unconditionally, warts and all, we create more love and more acceptance in our lives. What we think about, we bring about, and we don't need to look for that approval or that acceptance anywhere out there. Like everything else, this is a spiritual practice, and noticing it helps us cultivate our authenticity. And this is really important. We can't beat ourselves up when we realize that we're feeling unworthy or sorry for ourselves or upset about something that we did, because we are not what we do. We are who we are and what we know about ourselves. So when we feel ourselves triggered, if we can just stop and notice it, and then recognize that this is not the truth of who we are, and stand in our truth, we create space for light. We create space for truth. No longer accepting those judgments, we have an opportunity to grow and become more of who we already are, and to show the world that authentic self. So here's a tip. Sometimes when we have trouble moving through stuff, it helps to stop, breathe, maybe write, journal a bit, perhaps do a dialogue exercise, and talk to somebody that you love and respect. Talk to a partner, talk to a minister, a practitioner. Talk to someone who can hold space for you, because as you talk it out, chances are you'll come to the truth. You'll realize that there's a false belief in there, and you'll be ready to let go of it. They're not going to tell you that truth, but they'll hold space for you and hopefully ask you the kinds of questions that will allow you to reveal the truth to yourself. Recently, I became interested in an art called kintsugi. And it translates to gold joining. Does anybody know about that? It's pretty awesome. It's the Japanese art of repairing broken things and making them even more meaningful. broken cups, broken plates, vases, and putting them together with gold as the glue. The traditional method of kintsugi takes days, weeks, even months to complete one piece, and they sell for thousands and thousands of dollars. And one of the big lessons in kintsugi is that there's a lot of steps and a lot of waiting in between the steps, and it takes a lot of time. It takes as long as it takes. The metaphors within this craft are really profound. Things take as long as they take. Growing takes time, right? My purpose up here is to tell you stories that remind you of who you are, to encourage and support you as you lean in for that closer walk with the divine and everything that that means to you. Ministers say that we don't write talks, the talks write us. Well, this week, this talk has been writing me. I've also been working on kintsugi all week long for an upcoming workshop that I'm doing. And so, John, would you put that first slide up? I could talk about this for hours, but doing the work, I really felt the connection between all of these metaphors, the worthiness, self-love, gratitude, so much so that I had to include this in my talk. That first one is a traditional piece of kintsugi, one that took weeks to create, and that's put together like glue. There's a metaphor too, right? Glue with real gold. These ones on this side are the ones I did this week for my hack workshop, because it's really about the process. And if you guys want that workshop here, I'll talk to the leadership team, Marjorie, about doing that for you sometime. But these pieces are beautiful creations, and whether you use them or whether they go in a museum or you put them on an altar like mine are going to be for and for the workshop, they're special pieces because they represent the fixing of something that's broken. How often have you felt broken? There are times when we all feel that way. There are times when we don't feel like we can heal something. And this is an amazing way to work through that process of healing. And sometimes things are broken in so many pieces that they can't be fixed. And you might end up with a Zen garden or something even better. Rachel Naomi Remen, who wrote the book Kitchen Table Wisdom and My Grandfather's Blessings, tells a story about a 24-year-old man who came into her office to see her. And this man had had cancer, and he had his right leg removed up to the hip so that he could survive. And he was furious. He was angry with the entire world because he felt like at such a young age his life was taken away from him. Well, Rachel worked with him with drawing and painting and imagery and psychotherapy. And for 2 years, they worked together on a weekly basis so that he could move through that pain and that grief and that anger that he had. And all of a sudden, at about the 2-year mark, something happened. He started to come out of himself. And Rachel said, this is the time. And so she suggested to him that he start going to be of service to other people who are feeling what he felt 2 years before. Because we all know that when we're hurting, when we're really deep in pain and deep in hurt, we can't really be there for other people. But when we start to heal, it helps us heal even more when we can be supportive to other people and we can help others. So he decided to do this. So he started to go to the hospital and meet with people who were having the same kinds of surgeries, who were battling cancer, who were struggling with limitations, the kinds of things that he had dealt with. And he started telling Rachel in their weekly meetings about these people, and he started to be more uplifted and feel more empowered. Well, one day, he walked into a hospital room, and there was a woman with her back to the door, and there was light music, soft music playing in the hospital room. And he started to talk to her, and she wouldn't respond. And so he went out there, and he said to the nurse, can she hear me? Is everything okay? And the nurse said, oh, yeah, she can hear you. She's just devastated because she just had a double mastectomy. And she's just so sad, she doesn't want to talk to anybody. And we can't get her to engage with life or us or anything. So we put the music on, and we hope that that'll cheer her up a little bit. He said, let me see what I can do. So he walked in there, and he started talking to her, and he started dancing around, and she wouldn't turn around. She just kept her back to him. Finally, he didn't know what to do, so he took off his prosthesis, and he started hopping around the room, waving his leg around, and he started banging his leg on the end of the bed, and she turned around to look, see what he was doing, and she started to laugh. And she laughed and she laughed and she said, well, if you can dance, I can too. And she stood up and she danced with him. Well, a year later, they were sitting together in Rachel Naomi Remen's office. They were engaged. He was so happy and so proud to show his fiancée to his doctor. And she, of course, was thrilled with all the healing that was happening there. She reached into her desk drawer and she pulled out a file. And she said, do you remember these? And she opened the file and there were some drawings that he had made the first days of his therapy with her. And he picked them up and he started looking at them. And then he picked one in particular up and he said, wow, I remember this one. But you know, Rachel, it's not finished yet. And she said, really? What do you mean? And he reached across her desk and he grabbed a yellow highlighter. Now that picture was a picture of a vase. And the vase was on its side and it had a dark black squiggle line on it representing the brokenness of the vase. And Rachel remembered this vividly because when he did it, he took a black crayon and he marked so hard on that crack over and over and over again, she thought for sure the paper was going to tear, but it didn't. So he said, it's not finished because it's this right here, and he pointed to where the crack was. He said, this is where the light came in. And he took that highlighter and he drew light streaming out of that crack. So you see, those things that seem to break us make us stronger. They create a strong foundation for us. It's simple, but not so easy. And even if it seems like we're broken into a million pieces, there's always something in it for us. When we're broken, it creates space for the light to come in. So it's time now to claim your worthiness. Accept that you are enough, perfect already, warts and all. See, worthiness isn't based on what you do. It's what you know about you. It's what you know about who you are. And it's about showing up as your authentic, true, real self. Letting go of what's not you allows you to more fully embrace what is you. There was a man at the end of his life. He was laying in his bed and he was talking to his son, and he looked at his watch and he said, son, you're going to get this watch, but before I give it to you, and he took it off, and he said, before I give it to you, I want you to go into town to the jewelry store, and I want you to find out what it's worth. And so the son went to the jewelry store, and he came back, and he said, Father, the jeweler told me it's worth $100. And the father said, well, you know, this watch was given to me by my father, who got it from his father, who got it from his father, who got it from his father. It's over 220 years old. It's got to be worth more than $100. And so he said, take it to the pawn shop. See what the guy at the pawn shop has to say. So the son went to the pawn shop and he came home and he said, Father, the guy at the pawn shop said it was only worth $25 because it's got a big scratch on it and it's really old. And the father said, that's not right. He said, why don't you take him to the curator at the museum? So the boy was questioning his father's thinking, but he didn't want to disrespect his dad, so he did what his father asked him to do. So he went to the museum and he showed the watch to the curator, and he came back and he said, Dad, you're never going to believe it. The curator offered me $450,000 for the watch. He said it's an antique, it's precious, and they want to add it to their antique jewelry collection. And the father said, yeah. He said, you know, sometimes people don't know their worth, and they settle for something less. And some people even know their worth, and they still settle for something less. He said, my son, I want you to know your worth. Never, never settle. Know your worth. See, worthiness is an inside job. Accepting your worth will keep you from looking for it out there, because you'll never find it out there. And when we know our worth, we're open to give and to receive authentically. We can live our best life. We can live the life we came here to live. The Buddha said, you can search the whole universe and never find a single being more worthy of love than yourself. And so my challenge to you this week is to notice when you feel discomfort. Be the observer And instead of approaching the situation with fear or doubt, try and see it as an opportunity to love and accept yourself just the way you are, warts and all. And so it is. I'm gonna do a prayer, but first I want to have John show you another picture. The couple times I've been here before, I've told you about this beautiful young woman. Her name is Firefly. She's a musician within the CSL community. I know that I told you last fall that she had been hit by a trolley in Bremen, Germany, and she was in a coma. Well, she's coming out of the coma. She's back in the United States now with her mom and her father and her brother who are taking care of her. They live in the Bay Area. And one of the most beautiful things I saw on the Facebook page yesterday, and you can follow her on Facebook, Olivia Firefly Walker, and you can see the progress that she's making. One of the most beautiful things I saw was her mother posted that Firefly is now making cooing noises, that she's recognizing people. She leans forward when they talk to her, and she can squeeze people's hand. She can blink her eyes to acknowledge yes or no. 3 months ago, none of that was possible. So she's making a lot of progress. It's slow, but it's steady. And her mother wanted me to just say thank you to everyone who's been praying and holding her in the light. Please continue to do that. We all see her dancing and singing and playing music in centers like this again. So I wanted to give you that update. And now let's pray, huh? So, connecting with my authentic self, that place within me where I know that I am one with the one with that infinite power and presence of God that lives and loves and expresses itself and experiences life in, as, and through me, just as it does in, as, and through each person here. How grateful I am for those opportunities to grow, for those moments of discomfort that allow me to see that there is something in this for me. Those moments that allow me to walk more closely with the divine, to have a deeper, more powerful relationship, to be that presence of love on this planet and to do what I came here to do. How grateful I am for the many, many blessings that show up every day in my life. How grateful I am for this spiritual community that welcomes me and everyone else here with open arms. How grateful I am for the healing that comes from seeing those broken pieces and knowing that those things make each of us stronger, allowing us to step into the truth of who we are and be more authentic, loving ourselves for everything that we are and everything that we're not, warts and all. And so it's with that full, grateful heart that I release my word to that law of mine, that law that always, always says, yes, my beloved. And so it is. And so it is.